The pot glows. What does it mean?
It is a bad omen for the Union. Please, someone help me.
The ancestors must be appeased.
Morning light slowly spread across the village of Nyaruta, touching the rooftops like soft golden fingers. From far away, it looked peaceful, a place full of history, pride, and stories whispered by elders for generations. But beneath that peace lived secrets, old rules, and taboos that no one ever questioned. In Nyaruta, traditions were followed like laws. No one dared to stand against them, not even when they caused pain. Today was supposed to be a day of joy. Drums echoed through the air. Women danced in bright cloths that swayed like flames. Children ran around with excited laughter, chasing each other between the huts. Everywhere, people prepared for a wedding that the whole village expected to celebrate. But the bride did not feel any joy at all. Amani, the young woman at the center of it all, sat quietly inside her small mud house. Her aunt brushed her hair, tying it with colorful beads, but Amani barely felt the touch. Her face looked calm, almost too calm, like someone trying hard not to break. She was beautiful in a soft way, warm brown skin, gentle eyes, and a smile people loved. But today her smile was gone. Deep inside, she carried a sadness she could not hide anymore, no matter how hard she tried. Her aunt looked at her through the mirror made of polished metal. "You should be happy, Amani," she said softly. "Your life changes today." Amani only nodded. She did not trust her voice, because if she spoke, she feared she would start crying, and she must not cry. Not today. Outside, the drums grew louder. People were calling her name, celebrating her future. But inside her chest, Amani felt only fear. Today, she was being married to Jabari, the strongest hunter in the village. People respected him. People feared him. And Amani, she feared him most of all. She had no choice. This marriage was not her wish. It was a debt, a decision made without her heart. Her father had once been saved by Jabari's family. A life debt, the village called it. The kind of debt that cannot be refused. And Jabari had asked for Amani as payment. Amani's hands trembled as her aunt placed the ceremonial clay pot on her lap. Every bride received one on her wedding day. It was said to capture the first tears of marriage, a symbol of womanhood and strength. But there was another part of the legend, a part people avoided speaking out loud. If a bride's tears fall into the pot before the marriage is blessed, the elders whispered, the pot becomes an eternal vessel of sorrow. It will never empty. It will hold her pain forever. Amani had grown up hearing that story. She never believed it. Not until today. Her aunt stepped outside to join the other women. Amani stayed for a moment, alone in the silence. She held the clay pot in her hands. It felt heavier than it should have. She wondered if the pot already knew her sadness. Outside her door, people sang joyfully. They believed they were celebrating love. But Amani felt as if the walls around her were closing in. She stood, adjusting her wedding cloth. Her face was painted with white lines that marked her as a bride. When she stepped outside, everyone cheered. The bright colors around her seemed to glow. Reds, yellows, blues. But to her, they felt like shadows wrapping around her. Women danced in circles. Men beat the drums harder. The smell of roasted corn and spices floated in the air. It was a perfect wedding morning for anyone else. But not for her. Every step she took toward the center of the village felt heavier than the last. She clutched the pot tightly, fighting the sting in her eyes. She could not cry. She must not cry. But the truth was she was breaking. As she reached the open clearing where the ceremony would begin, she saw Jabari standing tall. His broad shoulders, sharp eyes, and proud stance made everyone around him bow with respect. But Amani felt her stomach twist in fear. He watched her with a look she could not read. Not warmth, not kindness, just ownership. Amani lowered her gaze, trying to steady her breathing. The pot in her hands felt colder now. The legend echoed in her mind. She tried to push away the thoughts, but the pressure inside her chest grew and grew. People surrounded her, singing, clapping, celebrating. They did not see her shaking hands. They did not hear her silent prayers. Don't cry. Don't cry. Please not now. Her vision blurred. The world around her became a swirl of colors and noise. Everything felt too loud, too close. And then, a single tear escaped. It slid down her cheek before she could stop it. She gasped softly as it fell, landing directly inside the clay pot. For a moment, everything went still. The drums continued, but Amani heard nothing. She felt a pulse, a tiny vibration, in her hands. Her eyes widened. The pot trembled just for a second. The vibration was soft, but unmistakable. A strange chill ran through her body. She looked around, but no one else seemed to notice. People danced, laughed, and cheered, blind to the quiet moment that had just changed everything. Amani held the pot tighter, her heart pounding. She knew the legend wasn't just a story. Something had awakened, and deep inside the pot, the curse had begun to breathe. Long before the drums of her wedding morning echoed across Nairuta, Amani's world had been different. Softer, warmer, filled with the kind of light that made her feel alive. That light had a name, Kato. Kato was not a warrior. He was not powerful or feared. He was a quiet, humble herbalist, a young man who spent most of his days walking through forests with a basket full of roots, leaves, and flowers. He knew the healing secrets of the earth better than most elders. Children loved him. Old women trusted him. And Amani loved him in a way she had never loved anything. Their bond did not begin with fireworks or sudden passion. It grew slowly, like a seed learning to reach for the sun. Amani first noticed him when she was a young girl sitting by the river, crying quietly after a harsh argument with her father. Kato had passed by, carrying his basket. He didn't say much. He simply sat down beside her and offered her a small flower with soft yellow petals. She remembered how that flower felt in her hand, gentle, comforting, alive. From that moment, their paths crossed more and more. They gathered herbs together in the early mornings when the dew still clung to the leaves. Kato taught her which plants healed burns, which soothed pain, which helped calm the heart when emotions grew too heavy. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just existed in comfortable silence. But every moment felt like a quiet promise. Under the shade of tall trees, they shared parts of themselves they had never shown anyone else. Amani told him her dreams, how she wanted freedom, how she wanted a family built on love, not duty. Kato told her his fears, that he wasn't strong enough, that he wasn't important enough for someone like her. But when he spoke, Amani always smiled because to her, he was everything. Their friendship became love before either of them realized it. Not a loud, dramatic love, but a deep one that grew through small moments. The way his hand brushed hers when they picked herbs. The way she laughed when he pretended not to know he was blushing. The way they found comfort in each other when life felt heavy. It was simple, pure, beautiful, but beauty does not always last. Their world shattered the day Amani's father returned home with a look she had never seen before, fear mixed with guilt. He sat Amani down and told her the truth. He owed a life debt to Jabari's family. Years ago, Jabari's father saved him from a wild beast during a hunt. According to the old laws of Nairuta, such a debt could be repaid only by service, land, or a daughter. Jabari had chosen Amani. When she heard this, the ground felt like it disappeared beneath her feet. Her heart raced painfully. She thought it was a cruel joke, but her father's trembling hands told her it wasn't. Amani begged him. She fell to her knees. She pleaded with everything inside her. Please let me choose my life. But her father could not lift the weight of tradition. He loved her, but he feared breaking the ancient rules even more. When her mother heard, she cried silently in the corner of their hut. She reached out and held Amani's face with shaking hands, whispering apologies Amani would never forget. But she, too, was bound by the chains of old customs. She had survived her own forced marriage. She believed she had no right to change what had been done to her daughter. Amani ran to the one person who always made her feel safe, Kato. When she told him, he didn't speak for a long time. His eyes darkened with pain, a deep pain that sat heavy inside his chest. He wanted to fight. He wanted to stand between Amani and Jabari like a shield. But he knew Jabari, and he knew what the village would do to any man who challenged a hunter of his status. But even then, he didn't run from her. He didn't push her away. He held her hands, his voice soft but trembling as he promised he would stay strong for her, even if his own heart was breaking. For days, they met in secret places, trying to find a solution. But in Nairuta, traditions were stronger than hope. No matter how much they dreamed, reality closed in on them like a tightening rope. Each night, Amani felt the wedding day creeping closer. She tried to hold on to the little moments with Kato, the way he smiled at her even when his eyes were full of sorrow, the warmth of his hand, the way he whispered that she deserved happiness. But the more she held onto these memories, the more it hurt. A part of her began to believe that love had turned against her, that it had abandoned her to a fate she never wanted. On the last evening before her wedding, she met Kato beside the river where their friendship began. The sky was painted in orange and purple. Birds returned to their nests. Everything around them felt like an ending. Kato stood in front of her, tears forming in his eyes, though he tried to hide them. His voice was quiet, heavy with loss. He told her he would not stop loving her, even if she was forced into another man's home. But Amani felt her heart breaking under the weight of those words. She wished she could stay in that moment forever. She wished time would freeze and save them. But life was not kind enough. As the sun slipped behind the hills, Amani looked at Kato one last time. And in that moment, she understood the cruel truth. Her heart belonged to him, but her future had been stolen. And when her wedding morning arrived, she walked into it with the belief that love itself had finally abandoned her. The morning of the ceremony began with an unnatural stillness, as though the entire village was holding its breath. Even the birds refused to sing, sensing the darkness that hung over the day. Villagers walked silently, avoiding each other's eyes, ashamed yet too afraid to oppose the chieftain's wishes. Amina stepped out of her hut with trembling steps, her eyes swollen from an entire night of crying. She carried the strange pot filled with her tears, the pot that never seemed to empty no matter how many tears it drank. Today, however, another figure stood in the village square. Michael Carter, an American anthropologist who had been living with the tribe for months, studying their rituals and folklore. He watched the unfolding scene with a mixture of confusion and deep concern, sensing that the atmosphere today was nothing like the peaceful ceremonies he had witnessed before. As the procession toward the forbidden shrine began, Amina was dressed in bright crimson garments meant for joyous unions. But today the fabric looked like a cruel joke. The villagers followed with bowed heads, while Michael walked among them, documenting quietly yet disturbed by the grief carved onto everyone's faces. He had grown close to Amina and Kofi during his stay, learning their language and becoming part of their small circle of trust. He knew Amina did not want this marriage. He knew Kofi's heart was breaking, and he knew something darker was taking place, something that went beyond tradition. When they reached the ancient shrine hidden among towering baobab trees, Michael felt an immediate shift in energy. The air was thick with incense, smoke, and a tension that seemed almost supernatural. Elders chanted rhythms that normally carried beauty and history, but today the sounds were heavy, mournful, and full of warning. The chieftain arrived dressed in layers of gold and deep colors, radiating pride and hunger. Michael observed him carefully, too carefully in fact. The chieftain had never liked Michael's presence in the village, believing him to be a threat to tradition and possibly to his control. Amina was forced to kneel before the altar while the pot of tears was placed at the center. Michael leaned closer, narrowing his eyes. Even from a distance, he could see that the pot was glowing faintly, pulsing with an energy he couldn't explain. As a researcher, he wanted to understand it. As a human being, he felt afraid for her. Meanwhile, Kofi stood behind the guards, visibly shaking with guilt and helpless rage. He wanted to protect Amina, but the chieftain had turned him into a silent soldier with no power to interfere. The ceremony began with forced chants as the elders nervously followed the chieftain's commands. Michael felt the hairs on his arms rise when the ritual fires flickered against the wind, burning backward. He whispered to himself, "That's impossible." But the villagers around him took a frightened step back. He could feel something shifting beneath the surface, something old and restless. As Amina's tears slid down her cheek and fell into the pot, the glow around it intensified. Michael instinctively took out his camera, but the moment he raised it, an elder glared at him with eyes full of warning. He slowly lowered it. This was no time for research. This was something sacred and something dangerous. The chieftain placed his hand on Amina's head to claim her spiritually. The pot responded immediately with a soft heartbeat-like pulse. Michael frowned deeply. He stepped forward slightly, unable to help himself, earning sharp looks from guards. Kofi saw him and gave a tiny nod, one that said, "Don't leave her alone. Please." Michael understood. He had not come to Africa expecting to intervene in spiritual matters, but now the lines were blurring. This was no ordinary ritual. This was coercion, desperation, and possibly something supernatural. Suddenly, the wind howled through the shrine, extinguishing half the torches at once. Villagers gasped. Kofi shouted Amina's name and was struck down by a guard. Michael stepped forward in anger, but another guard blocked him with a spear. He clenched his fists, trying to stay calm, but inside him grew a protective urgency he had never felt before. The ground trembled beneath them. A thin crack split the earth under the altar. The elders backed away, whispering frantic warnings to stop the ceremony. The chieftain, blinded by greed, refused. Then it happened. The pot erupted with blinding light. A shock wave burst outward, knocking villagers off their feet. Michael threw his arms around a young girl near him, shielding her from falling debris as the shrine shook violently. When he looked up, he saw Amina surrounded by a sphere of shimmering energy. Her bindings had snapped open. The symbols on the pot were glowing as though they were alive. The earth roared beneath them. Elders fell to their knees, terrified, whispering ancient prayers. The chieftain stumbled backward in shock. Michael stared, speechless, his scientific understanding shattering. Nothing in his textbooks or research could explain what he was witnessing. This was beyond culture, beyond mythology. This was real. The chieftain attempted to seize Amina again, but the energy field around her threw him backward, slamming him into a ceremonial pillar. Kofi broke free from the guards and rushed to Amina, while Michael moved quickly to support the elders who were collapsing from fear and exhaustion. The pot grew brighter, heavier, pulsating with ancient force as if the spirits themselves had awakened. The entire shrine descended into chaos. Stone statues toppled, roots cracked through the earth, and villagers scattered. Michael grabbed a fallen child and carried him to safety, glancing back repeatedly at the supernatural storm unleashed around Amina. He knew one thing with absolute clarity. This ceremony had awakened something powerful, and now the chieftain would stop at nothing to regain control. The hours after the failed ceremony felt heavier than night itself. The villagers avoided the shrine as if it had become the mouth of a monster. Smoke drifted slowly through the broken torches, floating above the cracked earth like wounded spirits searching for shelter. Amina was taken away quickly by the chieftain's guards, her face pale, her body trembling from what she had just survived. She didn't fully understand what had happened, only that something ancient and powerful had awakened inside the pot, and that the spirits had not been silent. Michael Carter stood at the edge of the destroyed shrine, staring at the glowing cracks in the ground. His breathing was unsteady. He had come to Africa to study traditions, but he now realized he had stepped into something far deeper than culture, something alive, something angry. Michael wanted to help Amina, but he also knew the chieftain would be watching him closely after what had happened. Even so, he couldn't shake the feeling that the spirits had shown him something on purpose. While the villagers ran away in fear, he stayed, studying the markings on the ground. The cracks formed a pattern, circles crossing, spirals merging, symbols that looked like ancient warnings. When he crouched to examine the earth, A wave of cold air rushed up from the fissure, raising goosebumps on his skin. He whispered to himself, "They're trying to say something," but the words felt too small for the truth rising inside him. Meanwhile, Amina was taken to a secluded hut at the far edge of the village. The chieftain ordered guards to stand outside day and night. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old clay. Amina sat alone in a corner, hugging her knees. The pot stood in front of her, glowing faintly in the darkness. Every few minutes, it released a soft vibration, like a heartbeat. Each pulse drained Amina's strength. She could feel it pulling at her chest, stealing bits of her spirit. She whispered a broken prayer, asking for help, asking for mercy. But the pot did not answer. It only glowed. While night fell, Michael secretly visited one of the elder priestesses, Mama Sephiu, a woman who had respected him since he arrived from the United States. She sat by a dying fire, her eyes full of sorrow. When she saw Michael, she sighed heavily, as if she had been waiting for him. He asked her about the symbols, about the pot, and about the crack in the earth. Mama Sephiu hesitated at first, but the weight of what she had witnessed earlier had shaken her beyond silence. Her voice was low and trembling as she finally told him. The pot was created for protection, not punishment. But when a bride cries unwilling tears before her marriage is blessed, the spirits of sorrow awaken. They demand balance. They demand truth. Michael frowned. Balance? Truth? What does that mean for Amina? Mama Sephiu's eyes filled with water. It means the spirits have judged our village. Something is wrong, far wrong. Someone has broken the laws of the ancestors, and the pot has risen to reveal it. Those words chilled Michael more than the cold night air. Far across the village, Amina lay weak on the hut floor, breathing slowly and painfully. Her skin felt ice cold. The pot beside her trembled again, glowing brighter. It wanted something, she could feel it. Every vibration crawled into her bones. She closed her eyes, praying for the morning to come quickly. But the spirits did not wait for sunrise. The air in the hut thickened, swirling with a strange energy. A soft voice, neither male nor female, seemed to whisper from inside the pot. Amina opened her eyes with fear. She wanted to scream, but her voice disappeared inside her throat. The pot gave a heavy pulse, and Amina felt her body jerk, as if someone had taken hold of her heart. Outside, the guards felt a rumble beneath their feet. They backed away from the hut in panic. One guard ran to report to the chieftain. Another fell to his knees, begging the spirits for forgiveness. The ground around the hut cracked slightly, just like the shrine earlier. The villagers hiding in their homes heard the rumble too. Mothers held their children close. Everyone whispered the same thing. The spirits are demanding something, but what? Meanwhile, Michael ignored all orders to stay away. Guided by fear, instinct, and something deeper, something protective, he ran toward Amina's hut with a racing heart. Villagers tried to warn him. Leave it. The spirits are angry. But he continued. He could not abandon her. He reached the hut and saw the glowing cracks forming a circle around it. It was as if the spirits had drawn a boundary, one humans should not cross. Michael hesitated but refused to step back. He had crossed oceans. He would cross this too. He took a deep breath and stepped over the crack. Inside, Amina lay unconscious. The pot glowed so brightly that it lit the entire hut like a lantern. Michael rushed to her, his voice shaking as he called her name. When he touched her arm, he felt a powerful shock that pushed him backward, slamming him into the hut wall. He gasped in pain, watching the pot pulse again and again. The spirits were not attacking him. They were warning him. He realized suddenly what Mama Sephiu meant, truth. The spirits wanted truth. He looked at Amina, fragile and fading. He looked at the pot, growing unstable. Then he understood. The spirits were demanding justice. The chieftain had forced her into marriage. A life debt had been twisted into control. Lies and fear had been hidden beneath the mask of tradition. The pot, created to protect women, had awakened because Amina had been wronged. The chieftain arrived then, shouting at the guards, furious that Michael had entered the hut. But as he tried to step inside, A powerful burst of wind pushed him back violently. His robe whipped around him. His crown fell off his head. The spirits rejected him. They knew his heart. They refused to let him close. Amina awoke slowly, eyes half open, weak but aware. She whispered, barely audible, "Michael, what do they want?" Michael knelt beside her again, still shaking from the shock. "They want the truth," he said softly, "and they want justice for you." The pot trembled louder, glowing brighter and brighter, responding to his words. Outside, villagers gathered in fear. Mama Sephew stepped forward with trembling hands and declared, "The spirits demand truth. Until the truth is spoken, the curse will rise." The wind roared. The pot blazed. The earth shuddered. And everyone knew the spirits would not rest until Amina's suffering was answered. Meanwhile, Michael ignored all orders to stay away, guided by fear, instinct, and something deeper, something protective. He ran toward Amina's hut with a racing heart. Villagers tried to warn him. "Leave it. The spirits are angry." But he continued. He could not abandon her. He reached the hut and saw the glowing cracks forming a circle around it. It was as if the spirits had drawn a boundary. One humans should not cross. Michael hesitated but refused to step back. He had crossed oceans. He would cross this too. He took a deep breath and stepped over the crack. Inside, Amina lay unconscious. The pot glowed so brightly that it lit the entire hut like a lantern. Michael rushed to her, his voice shaking as he called her name. When he touched her arm, he felt a powerful shock that pushed him backward, slamming him into the hut wall. He gasped in pain, watching the pot pulse again and again. The spirits were not attacking him. They were warning him. He realized suddenly what Mama Sephew meant. Truth. The spirits wanted truth. He looked at Amina, fragile and fading. He looked at the pot, growing unstable. Then he understood. The spirits were demanding justice. The chieftain had forced her into marriage. A life debt had been twisted into control. Lies and fear had been hidden beneath the mask of tradition. The pot, created to protect women, had awakened because Amina had been wronged. The chieftain arrived then, shouting at the guards, furious that Michael had entered the hut. But as he tried to step inside, a powerful burst of wind pushed him back violently. His robe whipped around him. His crown fell off his head. The spirits rejected him. They knew his heart. They refused to let him close. Amina woke slowly, eyes half open, weak but aware. She whispered, barely audible, "Michael, what do they want?" Michael knelt beside her again, still shaking from the shock. "They want the truth," he said softly, "and they want justice for you." The pot trembled louder, glowing brighter and brighter, responding to his words. Outside, villagers gathered in fear. Mama Sephew stepped forward with trembling hands and declared, "The spirits demand truth. Until the truth is spoken, the curse will rise." The wind roared. The pot blazed. The earth shuddered. And everyone knew the spirits would not rest until Amina's suffering was answered. The night after the spirits shook the village, a heavy silence settled over Nyaruta. People walked softly, afraid to disturb whatever ancient force had awakened beneath their feet. The wind itself felt different, colder, sharper, carrying whispers that only the bravest dared to hear. In the shadows of the forest path, a lone figure walked with steady steps, his eyes fixed on the lights of the distant village. It was Cato. He had returned at last. After months of studying healing rituals deep in the mountains, he carried scrolls, herbs, and a knowledge that had changed him forever. But all the learning in the world could not prepare him for the pain that struck his heart when he saw the fear in the air and heard Amina's name tied to whispered curses. Cato rushed through the village, stopping whoever he could to ask what had happened. Most villagers avoided his gaze, ashamed of what they allowed. Others shook their heads, refusing to speak. But one person did not turn away, Michael Carter. The American had been waiting near the shrine ruins, troubled and unable to sleep after witnessing the spirit's warning. When he heard footsteps approaching, he stood quickly. Under the moonlight, the two men faced each other for the first time. Though strangers, They shared the same urgency in their eyes. "You're Cato," Michael said quietly, as if he already knew. She spoke your name when she was fighting to stay conscious. Cato's heart throbbed painfully. Where is she? What happened to Amina? Michael explained everything he had seen. Amina collapsing, the pot glowing, the spirits refusing the chieftain, the crack in the earth circling her hut. Every word made Cato's fear rise like fire. When Michael told him about the pot's strange power, Cato froze. He had read about such vessels in the mountain manuscripts. His mentors had spoken of a pot created from heartbreak, bound with ancient sorrow. When used wrongly, it became a curse capable of draining a soul drop by drop. A pot that fed on suffering until someone broke the cycle. Without hesitation, Cato grabbed Michael's arm. "Take me to her. Now." The two men moved through the village in silence, careful to avoid guards and watchful eyes. They reached the hut at the far edge of the settlement. The cracks that had formed earlier still glowed faintly, like the spirits had left a burning fingerprint on the earth. Inside, Amina lay weak, barely breathing. Her skin had lost its warm glow, replaced by a frightening pale shade. The pot sat next to her, pulsing like a heart made of clay and pain. Cato dropped to his knees beside her, his chest tightening as he saw how thin she'd become. He brushed her hair gently from her face, whispering her name through a breaking voice. She stirred, opening her eyes just enough to recognize him. For a moment, her lips trembled with a fragile smile, but tears immediately followed. Tears of love, fear, and relief. The pot reacted instantly, glowing brighter. Cato instantly shielded her face, glaring at the pot with anger deep enough to shake him. Michael stepped closer and asked, "Do you know what this thing is? How do we stop it?" Cato nodded slowly. "I learned its origins in the mountains. They told me a story the village elders hid for generations." He spoke in a low, steady tone, his eyes never leaving Amina. Centuries ago, there had been a bride named Zyra, forced into a marriage she did not want. She cried alone on her wedding night. Her tears fell onto the clay pot meant to protect her, but her sorrow was so powerful, so deep, that the spirits themselves felt it. They warned the village to free her, to honor her heart, but the chieftain refused. Zyra's grief grew until her tears overflowed, filling the pot endlessly. Her sorrow became a river that drowned fields, destroyed homes, and swept across innocent lives. When she died, her spirit fused with the pot, turning it into a vessel of never-ending sorrow. To keep the village safe, the elders created strict rules. Never force a bride, never make her cry before the blessing, and never ignore a woman's suffering. But those rules were forgotten over time, until Amina's tears awakened Zyra's spirit again. Michael listened with wide eyes. "So, the pot isn't evil, the people were." Cato nodded. "It only reacts to injustice." Amina's pain, her forced marriage, woke it. Amina tried to speak, but her voice was weak. Cato held her hand gently, tears shining in his own eyes. "Don't talk, my love. I'm here now." She squeezed his hand faintly, then whispered, "You shouldn't be here. They'll hurt you for coming." Cato shook his head, leaning closer. "I don't care. I would cross any danger to reach you." Michael felt the raw emotion between them, a love so deep it pulled at the room's energy. Even the pot dimmed slightly, as if listening. Cato then continued, his voice firm with clarity. "There is only one way to weaken the pot. It cannot be emptied by force or by magic or by destroying it. Only one thing can break the cycle of sorrow." Michael leaned forward. "What is it?" "An act of pure, selfless love," Cato answered. "Not love born of desire, but love willing to sacrifice. Love willing to give." Amina's eyes widened with fear. "You can't," she begged. "Cato, please don't even think." But Cato already understood the path ahead. Michael stepped forward, trying to help, but Cato shook his head softly. "This is not your burden. You've done enough by helping me reach her." Amina gripped his hand harder, despite her weakness. "They'll kill you," she whispered. "Jabari will kill you." I don't fear Jabari, Cato said, brushing a tear from her cheek. I fear losing you. Michael felt his chest tighten. He had studied many cultures, seen many rituals, but he had never witnessed love used as a weapon against darkness. Seeing Cato's resolve, he stepped back respectfully, giving them space. Amina tried to sit up, but her body was too weak. The pot glowed again, sensing her fear. Cato placed a calming hand on her shoulder. Rest, Amina. I'm here, and I promise, I will not let this curse take you. Michael took a deep breath. Tell me what you need me to do. Cato looked at him grateful. Protect the entrance. If Jabari finds me here, he will attack. I need time to prepare the ritual. Michael nodded firmly. You have my word. As Michael moved to the door, Amina whispered one last plea, her voice trembling. Cato, don't risk yourself for me. He leaned down and kissed her forehead, his touch soft but steady. Amina, for you, I would risk everything. The pot trembled violently, as if the spirit inside recognized the truth in his words. The night was not yet over, and the greatest act of love was still to come. As the truth of the pot spreads, the village atmosphere thickens with fear. Amina's emotional storm intensifies, and every wave of anger or sorrow she feels makes the pot tremble and overflow with darker, heavier tears. Michael, the American anthropologist who originally came to Uganda to study pre-colonial marriage rituals, notices that the pot's behavior changes specifically when Amina is near. He becomes unsettled when his audio recordings capture whispers that no one else can hear, whispers calling Amina's name, rising and falling like morning songs. Elders gather, arguing that the curse has awakened a spirit that feeds on the bride's suffering. Meanwhile, Michael's scientific curiosity shifts to trembling concern as he begins to realize that the pot isn't reacting to nature. It is reacting to Amina's soul. The village ground shakes lightly at night, and shadows move without wind, marking the beginning of a deeper spiritual unrest. The curse grows bolder when several villagers confront Cato, accusing him of bringing an outsider back and provoking the spirit's jealousy. Animals grow restless, fires refuse to light, and children speak of seeing a weeping woman wandering near the river. When the elders attempt a small, cleansing ritual, the pot erupts violently, its tears splashing outward, burning the soil as if filled with acid. Michael, trying to protect Amina, steps forward but is thrown back by a force he cannot see. Realizing the spirit has begun to manifest physically, the elders declare that Amina's heart is now bound to the pot's rage. A message forms in the spilled tears, glowing faintly under moonlight. The bride must choose. Michael warns that the spirit may be demanding a sacrifice, while Cato insists there must be another way. But deep inside, Amina begins to fear that her pain has become a weapon, one capable of destroying everyone she loves. Night fell like a heavy curtain over Neruda. The village was silent, afraid to breathe, as though the air itself feared the wrath of the awakened spirits. The pot, now overflowing more than ever, seemed to pulse with a heartbeat of its own, sending shivers through the floorboards of Jabari's household. Inside, Amina lay nearly lifeless beside it, her body pale and trembling, her soul weakening with every passing second. Cato moved through the shadows, heart pounding, carrying the knowledge he had learned from the mountain manuscripts. Each step closer to the house felt heavier, as if the spirits themselves were testing his resolve. Michael Carter, the American anthropologist who had stayed near the shrine and witnessed the pot's awakening, followed quietly. He had insisted on accompanying Cato, sensing that his presence might help stabilize the spiritual energy, or at least record what was happening. As they entered the household under the cover of darkness, a cold wind swept through the rooms, extinguishing the torches and making the pot's glow shine like a small sun. The shadows of the walls twisted, forming the vague shapes of anguished faces. Cato reached Amina and gently lifted her in his arms, whispering her name as her fragile eyes opened briefly. The pot's surface trembled violently at their proximity, as though aware of the threat he posed to its hold over her. Michael moved to the doorway, positioning himself as a lookout, while also observing the strange vibrations and pulses of energy. The room was thick with a suffocating power, and Michael felt a low hum vibrate through his chest, something both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Cato knew the time had come to act. He recited the ancient words taught to him in the mountains, invoking the ritual of love's offering. This forbidden ritual demanded that he give a portion of his own life essence to weaken the spirit's hold over the pot. Every syllable pulled strength from his body. Every movement risked leaving him vulnerable. Amina's weak hand reached for his, sensing that their love, even in the darkest moment, was the only weapon powerful enough to fight this curse. The pot shook violently, as if enraged, sending tremors through the floor. Shadows lengthened and bent toward Cato, warning him of danger, but he held fast. Michael could only watch in tense silence, feeling the air thicken and the hairs on his arms rise with static energy. As Cato completed the ritual, his body glowed faintly, faint trails of light streaming from his hands into the pot. Amina stirred fully awake, seeing the sacrifice he was making. Tears fell from her eyes, but this time, some of them landed outside the pot, on the floor beside her. The pot throbbed and rattled violently, the energy in the room surging as if it were alive, resisting the act of love. Michael instinctively stepped back to avoid being thrown by the waves of supernatural force radiating from the vessel. His notebook dropped on the floor, rattled as though caught in a storm. He realized that he was witnessing something far beyond his academic studies. A raw, unfiltered confrontation between human emotion and ancient, mystical power. For a tense moment, silence fell, an uneasy pause where the air itself seemed to wait for the outcome. Cato's face was pale, drenched in sweat, but his grip on Amina's hand never faltered. The pot's violent pulses began to slow, its glowing light dimming slightly as the ritual took hold. Michael noticed that the patterns on the floor formed fleeting shapes resembling a heart, almost as if the spirit inside the pot was recognizing the purity of their love. Amina's voice, weak but determined, whispered, "Cato, I believe in you. I believe in us." That simple affirmation seemed to strengthen the ritual, stabilizing the energy and easing the violent shaking. The first rays of moonlight broke through the cracks in the ceiling, illuminating the pot and revealing faint cracks forming along its surface. Cato's breathing was labored, his strength fading, but a sense of hope began to bloom. The pot shivered, vibrating as if testing the limits of the offering. Michael, standing near the doorway, saw the faint outlines of what looked like spectral hands reaching toward the vessel and then recoiling, as if acknowledging the act of sacrifice. Amina's gaze met Cato's, their eyes locking in a mixture of gratitude, fear, and love. He smiled faintly, whispering, "Hold on, we're almost through." The night seemed endless, the house filled with the electric tension of the spirit world testing the bounds of human courage. The air was alive with soft cries, echoes of centuries of sorrow that had been trapped in the pot. Cato's body began to weaken more rapidly, and Michael feared he might collapse. But Amina, sensing the ritual nearing completion, leaned forward, pressing her hands to the pot for the first time without fear. The pot shivered violently once more, then let out a sound like rushing water as the energy began to release. Its glow shifted from harsh crimson to soft, golden warmth, signaling the first real weakening of the curse. Michael, now realizing the ritual was succeeding, stepped closer cautiously. He saw a faint mist rise from the pot, carrying images of past brides, past sorrows, and memories of heartbreak that seemed to dissolve into the air. The room, once suffocating, now felt lighter, and the oppressive energy that had threatened to crush Amina was fading. Cato slumped to the floor, drained but alive, and Amina wrapped her arms around him tightly. For the first time in days, the pot sat silently, almost peacefully, its glow fading to nothing. Outside, the wind had calmed. Even the spirits, it seemed, had paused to acknowledge the power of pure love that had broken through centuries of sorrow. Michael finally exhaled, feeling both relief and awe. He had come to study culture, to observe rituals, but now he had witnessed a love that had literally confronted a supernatural curse. He looked at Cato and Amina, their hands still intertwined, and understood the truth the elders had hidden for so long. Some forces could not be controlled by tradition, nor silenced by fear. They could only be met with courage, sacrifice, and the purest of hearts. And tonight, in the heart of Neruda, those forces had been challenged, and love had begun to triumph. The first light of dawn had not yet touched the village, but inside Jabari's household, chaos erupted. The pot, weakened but not destroyed, trembled violently as if sensing the final confrontation. Jabari stormed into the room, his face twisted with rage and fear. His eyes darted between Amina and Cato, who were huddled together, drained but determined. Michael Carter, standing near the doorway, instinctively stepped forward, ready to intervene if the situation turned deadly. He had never imagined his studies of ritual and folklore would lead him to a moment where human violence and supernatural power collided. Jabari raised a spear, shouting, "You will pay for this disrespect. You will not take what is mine." The air grew heavy and oppressive, charged with the lingering energy of the spirits. As he lunged toward Amina and Cato, the pot vibrated furiously, its cracks glowing with a fierce golden light. The spirits seemed to recognize the danger, and for the first time, they acted directly. A burst of light shot from the vessel, striking Jabari in the chest and throwing him backward across the room. He crashed into a pillar, stunned and disoriented, the spear clattering from his grasp. Michael grabbed the nearest table for cover, marveling at the raw power of the pot, its force protective, not vengeful, aimed at those who had caused suffering. Amina, gathering the last of her strength, stood slowly beside Cato. Her eyes, bright with resolve, met Jabari's furious glare. "I choose love over fear," she declared, her voice ringing like a bell through the room. Cato tightened his grip on her hand, nodding, and together they stepped closer to the pot. The vessel began to rise, hovering slightly above the floor, glowing with intense golden-white energy that pulsed like a heartbeat. Michael took a cautious step back, shielding his face as shards of light began to break free, spinning around the room in a radiant storm. The spirits, it seemed, were answering the pure act of love, magnifying it until it became unstoppable. Jabari scrambled to attack again, but the energy around the pot surged outward, forming a barrier of blinding light. He was thrown back once more, hitting the wall with a crash that shook the wooden floorboards. The house trembled violently, dust and small debris falling from the ceiling. Michael held his arms over his head, instinctively bracing against the shock waves, feeling the incredible force that only true selfless love could unleash. Cato and Amina stood together in the center, surrounded by the glowing aura, their bond amplifying the ritual beyond anything Michael had ever studied or seen. Then, with a deafening roar that shook every corner of the house, the pot exploded. Water and light burst outward in a cascading wave, drenching the floor and washing over the walls. The golden shards spun in the air before crashing to the ground, disappearing into dust as though consumed by the force of the ritual. Jabari was thrown back once more, sprawling helplessly among the debris, stunned and defeated. The oppressive energy vanished instantly, replaced by an almost sacred calm. Michael, heart racing, rushed to check on Amina and Cato. They had collapsed to the floor, exhausted but alive. Their eyes met his, and even in their fatigue, a silent gratitude passed between them. The house, once dark and suffocating, now seemed to breathe with renewed life. The broken pot lay in pieces, but its destruction marked the end of centuries of sorrow, the liberation of trapped spirits, and the triumph of love over fear. Michael moved cautiously through the room, examining the shards without touching them, aware that they still held a faint residue, of supernatural power. Outside, the village began to stir, sensing that the curse had finally lifted. The first birdsong since the awakening returned, and a soft breeze carried away the lingering shadows of the night. Amina, her strength slowly returning, wrapped her arms around Cato. Tears streamed down her face, this time freely, but no longer feeding the pot. Michael knelt beside them, amazed, recording silently in his notebook the extraordinary events he had just witnessed. He knew that the story he had come to study had transformed him entirely, not just as a researcher, but as someone who had seen firsthand the raw force of love and courage against darkness. Together, the three of them rose from the floor, and for the first time in weeks, the room felt safe, bright, and alive. The pot that never emptied had finally broken, not through destruction, but through the selfless, unyielding love of two hearts. Outside, the first rays of dawn touched the village of Neruda. Michael looked on, knowing that this night would be recorded in history, not in books alone, but in memory, in the lives of those who had survived, and in the hearts of everyone who understood that love could overcome even the darkest of curses. The first light of morning spread gently over Neruda, painting the village in soft golds and pinks. The chaos of the night was gone. The oppressive shadow that had hung over every home and field lifted, leaving behind a quiet peace. Crops that had withered under the curse now glimmered with dew. Animals returned cautiously to the fields, and the air itself seemed clearer, lighter, as if the spirits had finally been appeased. Michael Carter stood at the edge of the village, notebook in hand, watching the changes with awe. He had seen natural phenomena before, but nothing compared to the miraculous calm that followed the breaking of the pot. Amina walked beside Cato through the village square, her hand in his. She was still weak, but her posture had strength now. The villagers, many still fearful, gathered cautiously at a distance. They whispered among themselves, recognizing the courage of the young couple and the power of love that had freed them all. When Jabari appeared at the far end of the square, the elders stepped forward to confront him. He had survived the night, but his arrogance was gone, replaced by fear and a faint trace of shame. Amina met his gaze, calm and resolute. "Your cruelty ends here," she said firmly. "The village no longer obeys fear. It obeys justice." Jabari lowered his head, stripped of his status, and was escorted out of the village. Michael noted the relief in the villagers' faces, the sense that balance had finally returned. The elders approached Amina, their heads bowed. They apologized for their failures, acknowledging the centuries of tradition that had allowed such injustice to flourish. Michael, observing closely, realized that their hearts were changed as much as the village itself. Amina and Cato shared a quiet smile, aware that the victory was not only theirs but belonged to everyone willing to recognize truth and love over fear. Michael stepped forward, speaking gently. "The spirits have accepted this act of courage," he said, "and so has the earth. Remember this day. It will guide your generations." Amina nodded, gratitude and hope shining in her eyes. As the sun rose higher, the village of Neruda began to breathe again, free from the shadow that had threatened to consume it. The village of Neruda basked in the golden light of a new day, the air crisp and filled with a sense of rebirth. Amina and Cato walked hand in hand toward the edge of the village, carrying the remnants of the broken pot. Its shards, once filled with endless sorrow, now felt like empty vessels of the past, symbols of suffering transformed by courage and love. Michael Carter followed closely behind, notebook in hand, quietly documenting the final moments of a story that had tested the limits of human spirit, devotion, and bravery. He marveled at how a single act of pure love could ripple through generations, ending centuries of sorrow in an instant. Together, Amina and Cato buried the shards under a blooming tree, its flowers a brilliant symbol of renewal. As they pressed the last fragment into the soil, Amina whispered, "These tears, once endless, are finally at rest." Cato kissed her hand, feeling the warmth of life return to both the village and their hearts. Michael watched in silence, struck by the serenity that had replaced fear. He realized that sometimes the greatest lessons of power are not found in force or study, but in the strength of compassion and the willingness to risk everything for someone you love. Amina turned to the village, her gaze steady and proud. The elders nodded, the villagers smiled, and even the earth seemed to hum with approval. Michael stepped back, taking one last look at the couple who had transformed sorrow into hope. In the distance, the wind carried the faint memory of the spirit's presence, now calm, now free. Amina held Cato close, breathing in the dawn, and whispered softly, "Love emptied what sorrow never could." The village, once shadowed by fear and curses, now embraced a future built on courage, devotion, and freedom, proof that even the heaviest burdens could be lifted when hearts were pure and brave.